Tai Chi as Qigong. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. When I first talk to someone about Qigong, often it'll be when someone asks me what I do, and I might say I teach Qigong, and they've never heard of Qigong, because at the moment, a lot of people are still discovering even what Qigong is. A lot more people know what Qigong is now than a few years ago, and even a few years ago, there's a lot more than before. So, awareness of Qigong is growing very rapidly, but still, a lot of people have never heard of it before. And it sounds a bit exotic to them, and they don't really have any reference points. And so I'll often give a very brief description, because often it's just a little brief moment with someone. It's not like I can have a long conversation and explain everything in detail. But I might say, it involves moving and breathing and meditating, and we do this to work with our energy. Super quick little brief way to give them a little bit of an idea. And another thing I'll use sometimes is I'll say, well, it's a bit like Tai Chi, because while many people haven't heard of Qigong, a lot of people have heard of Tai Chi. They don't necessarily know a huge amount about it, but they've, maybe they've seen someone doing some Tai Chi, and so they have some reference point. And that then gives them a little bit of a reference point of what Qigong might be like as well. And what I'm going to talk about in this vlog is a little bit about that connection between Tai Chi and Qigong, and where sometimes there gets to be a little bit of confusion come in around that as well. Because a lot of people, naturally, when they're just starting to learn something, they don't have a whole lot of context and perspective around what it is that they're learning, and they misunderstand a few things and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about Tai Chi first, what that is, and then how it connects to Qigong, and then a little bit about considering Tai Chi as a form of Qigong, and how that can be useful, and maybe some things that sometimes get missed there, and why it's important to have some context around that. So Tai Chi, there are mainly two things that people might be referring to when they talk about Tai Chi. Now, one of these is a very, potentially deep, very broad philosophical concept about polarity and the dynamic movement of energy that comes from polarity, and finding harmony within this. And so that is, Tai Chi is a philosophical concept, Tai meaning great, and Ji meaning polarity or limit, and so emphasizing polarity, right? And that's where there's a famous, the yin-yang sign. That's a Taiji Tu. It's a diagram of harmony between yin and yang, a harmony of Taiji. So that's one way. And there are Qigong practices that specifically, and they focus directly on Taiji, on developing polarity and finding that activation of energy flow that comes from this, and harmony that comes from this. For example, in the Elemental Alchemy Qigong program that we have at Long White Cloud Qigong, one of the practices, there's a whole series of practices actually that we focus on Taiji. Others focus on Wuji and Wuxing, but it's part of developing our energy. The other thing that probably more commonly people are referring to when they say Taiji is Taiji Chuan. Now, the Taiji part is exactly the same. The Chuan often gets dropped off, and so people aren't aware that they're talking about maybe not exactly the same thing. The Chuan means fist. So basically, Taiji fist, Taiji martial art. And so it's a martial art that works with yin and yang and the dynamic circulation of energy, but it's specifically a martial art. Now, many, probably the vast majority of people at this stage, practice Taiji primarily for their health and well-being. And so much so that I'd say, again, at this stage, probably the vast majority of people doing Tai Chi don't even realize that it's a martial art, because they're doing all these movements and they're doing it for their health, for their balance, for other aspects of their health and well-being. And some of the movements can seem a little bit abstract if you don't really know what you're looking at, what you're working with. Maybe not clearly fighting movements, so they don't even realize they're doing a martial art. But the whole practice is framed around martial application. That's at its very roots, if it's Taiji Chuan, and that's what most people are doing. Now, one very surface level misconception that comes out, so Taiji or Tai Chi, subtle different accent, and both of those can be correct. There are different accents, different dialects throughout China that will say words slightly differently. Often people will confuse that ji with qi, not quite the same, and think it's the same word. And so they think, yeah, I'm doing Tai Chi, that's what I'm doing, lots of stuff with qi. So, and they are, and that's the thing, they are. They are working with the energy, but that can become confusing because it's not the same qi as in Qigong. The ji means polarity or limit, whereas the qi in Qigong is energy. It's much more directly about energy. And that can get confusing for people because they think like, oh yeah, it's all qi, it's all... And this can sometimes lead them to think that, well, that Taiji is just Qigong. And because of the way, again, Taiji it's a martial art, all of the practices are framed and focused in a way that, again, if you're doing it well, if you've been taught good principles, are eventually, maybe not straight away, it can take some development to become skilled with these principles, but are eventually applicable as a martial art. And so they're focused on some specific things. And sometimes this can lead people to think that by doing Tai Chi, they are doing all of Qigong, in a sense. Like they think like, yeah. And so they think that all Qigong is about what they do in their Tai Chi practice. And it's really not the case, because Tai Chi uses Qigong principles extensively. It's fantastic. People get a lot of benefit from it, but it has a very specific focus, a very specific application. Qigong, on the other hand, it's a much broader term. All the different ways we focus on energy, work with energy, develop skill with energy. Qi meaning energy, Gong meaning work or skill. And as such, it includes Tai Chi. And it includes all the principles they focus on of working with their energy in Tai Chi. And that's fantastic, beautiful principles. But it also spreads out more broadly to many other possible focuses, many other possible ways that you can work with your energy that aren't going to fit so well within that Taiji frame, that Taiji way of thinking and focusing on things. And so a very short way to maybe sum this up is that it's probably true that all Taiji is Qigong. It's hard to think of how that might not be true. But I don't know, maybe someone could do some kind of Taiji Chuan and not be working with the energy. That would seem odd. That would seem to go against the principles of Taiji Chuan. But so all Taiji Chuan is Qigong. It all fits. It's all a type of Qigong, and as such, people can get a lot of benefit just for their energy, and as a result of that, for their health and well-being, by practicing Tai Chi. On the other hand, not all Qigong is Tai Chi. Qigong often focuses on many other things as well. It's a much bigger topic and includes practices that aren't really going to be particularly relevant to Taiji Chuan practice. Because other than, I don't know, making someone healthier or more peaceful or more well-balanced, because that helps everything to some extent, isn't going to specifically apply within that context, that frame of practices and movements that are applied as a martial art. And so, yeah, all Tai Chi is Qigong, but not all Qigong is Tai Chi. It involves much more. And so I think it's fantastic that so many people do Taiji Chuan. They might just call it Taiji, they might drop off the Chuan, but they're doing Taiji Chuan. It's a beautiful practice. I've done a fair amount of Taiji Chuan at different points over the years. It's never been a main focus of mine, but there's lots of great principles to dive deep into, and a lot of people love to do that, and they get so much benefit from it. Awesome. Little bit of just a caution or a caveat though, in considering Tai Chi and its connection with Qigong, to not think that Tai Chi is everything, because naturally within Taiji Chuan you're going to focus on certain principles and they're going to be really useful within your Tai Chi, and they're often going to be really useful for your health too, but you're not going to focus on a whole lot of other things that do exist within the field of Qigong that are also really useful in different contexts with different focuses. All right, hopefully that's been an interesting one for at least a few of you, give you a little bit more context around Tai Chi and Qigong and how they fit together. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.